And we should be back. Yep, I was a little rudely interrupted by my internet going down there. It does just like to occasionally randomly crash for no reason. Well, maybe crash isn't the right word, but yeah. It's just often enough to be annoying, but not really often enough to be reportable as like a fault to my ISP. I think the last time I tried, they just went, yeah, that's normal, it'll go down occasionally. It's just when it happens to coincide with me streaming, it's a little bit annoying. So, anyway, I've circularized in a close orbit. I haven't done anything else. But we're just really getting down, getting around to the day side. The plan is to try and land on one of the nice big flat areas, which we should be able to do with our engine bell. Probably around about there might be quite... yeah, that might be our best bet. So, if we're going to do it, that's the best place to do it. And hopefully it will all go somewhat according to plan. So where do we want to start burning retrograde? Let's warp ahead a little bit. And because it's Minmus, it'll be possible to do a fairly comfortable low powered landing. We won't need to do any it's not like this is a massively heavy craft anyway. So let's point retrograde. Might as well get ourselves oriented correctly as well. Make things a little easier, hopefully. And burn. So bring our periapsis down to intersect with the ground, of course. Right. Let's go for a roundabout there. Okay. If we warp ahead, let's say around about there, and start to decelerate. Yeah, it's usually only a couple of minutes, but it's long enough to be annoying. Ooh, the surface is getting a little bit close. It's fine. This isn't even the closest we've been, although that was pretty damn close. Right, so our orbital speed isn't even that high, so we don't have that much velocity to kill to start with. So I want to point the craft like there, maybe? I have managed, you know, normally I get to the point where I can get MechJeb to do it all, and I just let MechJeb do it all, but I can do it myself after a fashion. It's just usually a little clunky. Oh, you see that line intersecting there? Okay, we might be coming down a bit sooner than planned, actually. Okay, never mind. We don't want to smack into that ridge. Jebediah would not enjoy that at all, so let's... Oh, that's actually pushing us over? Yes. I have no idea what I'm doing, but it seems to be sort of working, kind of, maybe, a bit. I sound like I know what I'm doing, right? Yeah, totally. Right, if I burn a little more fuel, I want to land back on these flats somewhere. MechJeb is... What's MabJeb? I assume you mean MechJeb. It's mechanical Jeb. It's a mod that basically adds a kind of flight computer that automates a lot of things. And if you're playing in Sandbox, you basically have access to all the functions from the start. But if you are doing it in career mode, it unlocks various functions as you're playing through the different, unlocking the different science nodes. So, theoretically, you've got to do more things yourself before you get to the point of them being automated. But you also like when I started using MechJeb, it was mainly for things like getting vessel stats. But if you just want that, there's another mod called Kerbal. Can't even words. Kerbal Engineer, which is probably better for just that purpose. But I've stuck with MechJeb because it's useful and it's what I know. So we can actually speed things up a little bit. Okay, we're going to land more or less where I originally wanted to land. It's just I noticed the orbital line was intersecting with the terrain, which is a bad thing unless it's what you actually wanted to happen. I think given that this is Minmus, I think we will have lots of Delta V to spare even when we get back to Kerbin, just because I'm using the same lander that I was using for the Mun. In a lot of ways, Minmus is actually the easier first body to land on because it's that much smaller. It's a lot more forgiving in terms of once you've gotten there, which costs about the same as getting to the Mun. It's a lot cheaper in terms of the maneuvers around the body and then actually landing and taking off again on the body itself. How am I doing? I'm doing fine, Alzu, apart from kind of messing up my missions a little bit. And also my internet going down and losing about half my viewers, but that's fine. Apart from that, it's all fine. I could get a tiny bit of deceleration going on the engine. I don't think they're Martians, but they are little and green. Let's get a tiny little bit more thrust. Actually, having the surface info will be quite useful because that tells me. This tells you the altitude above sea level, but it's not necessarily always your altitude above the terrain, which the surface info panel gives me. Oh, that's the wrong way. So basically trying to kill both our sideways and our vertical velocity. Do a nice gentle touchdown on the engine bell, although I think I might just to be on the safe side. No, not the landing gear. We want. There we go. We might want to stow away the solar panels, because if it tips over and bashes the solar panels, then yeah. Right, this is just entirely, you know, gently does it. It's not a terrible looking spacecraft. It's a bit long though, but that's mainly because we've got the Science Junior in there, which we don't normally have on this craft. Is landing and surviving an option, or I guess we'll find out. Theoretically, yes. Also, theoretically, I have landing legs. And for those of you that missed this little design flaw that I discovered earlier, once I was already in flight, the legs don't deploy properly, so yeah, that was an interesting discovery. Oh, that's the wrong key. I'm forever doing this. This is why I'm so bad at takeoffs and landings. Is I tend to fumble my keys a lot. So yeah, we're just very slowly falling at the moment. I might speed it up slightly. Oh no, we can't do... Oh, we're too low altitude to time warp at this point. It's the Scottish saltire. The saltire, I mean, saltire just means, you know, a cross on a solid blue or on a solid background of colour. So there's plenty of flags that are a saltire, but usually when people say the saltire, they mean the flag of Scotland, the white and blue one. We're probably going to do a belly flop. I don't imagine I'm going to be able to control this enough to do a nice landing on the engine bell. But I guess we'll see. Right, we're about 1,000 meters off the ground right now. Might even want to try and kill some more of my horizontal velocity. Right, we're more or less coming straight down at this point, which is what we want. We still have a bit of horizontal motion, but not a lot. And this is me actually, you know, properly doing this myself this time, and not as with that first mun landing, faffing around with trying to switch between different nodes or different using MechJeb a bit too much. Right, we'll throttle up a little. Last couple of 100 meters. We're basically about there. We've killed most of our velocity. People who are better at this than me, which is, you know, quite a few people, would probably be able to do this with a far less, you know, cautious approach. Jebediah always looks happy. There is, in fact, a modifier that is used for a couple of the Kerbals. It can happen randomly with newly spawned ones, but it's always true for Jebediah, where he more often looks, you know, happy about what's happening and excited rather than scared out of his mind, terrified, which some of the other Kerbals can look, you know, a little pensive. Kind of wish there was a way to... Maybe I should move that off to one side. You can do that. You can have it moved off to one side a bit, so you've got more of the centre part of the screen. 200 meters. We're still well north of 2,000 meters a second delta V on the craft as well, so that's fine. Right, so the more gentle the landing, the better. But you don't want to overcook it, because then you start going up again. So just very gently drifting down. 50 meters. You can see the shadow now quite clearly. It's one of the other reasons why Minmus is a lot easier to land on than the Mun. The Mun is a lot more cratered than Minmus, whereas Minmus has these very large flat areas. And as you can imagine, it's a lot easier to land on a nice big wide flat area than it is on more heavily sloped terrain. Wait, which... Oh, no. Ah, wrong one. Oh, for goodness sake. Okay, so, you know how I said I like to fumble the keys? Yeah. I wasn't lying. I definitely wasn't lying. Right, are we going to tip? Everybody hold your breath. Oh. It's kind of like, it's like you've, you know, a penny that you've flipped and it's kind of going round and round and round and round and you don't know if it's going to tip over. It is trying to compensate. If I turn off, I think it will. Ooh, I think it will just fall over. Yeah, we're hopping a little bit because, of course, this is a vectored engine, or it can gimbal. So, if I shut that down, actually. No, it still does that even when it's shut down. I think I have to. Oh, I'd have to turn off the gimbals. If I turn off the gimbal, maybe that'll help. It wants to. This is the point where landing gear would be really useful, but nope. Oh yeah, it won't even try if I don't have the bay open. Go, go, gadget, landing gear, go! Except, oh, okay, that's really not what I wanted to happen. Yeah, let's not do that again. So, we're down. We didn't explode, but this really does need some landing legs. So, the contract says we have to plant a flag, and we have to gather some science. So, Jebediah is actually going to have to get out. But we'll do the science first. And close the doors on that. Log temperature. Take a crew report. This really does have quite a nasty wobble. If it falls over, it's not that bad. It's just... yeah, I'd like it not to. It just makes things easier if it doesn't. But I think the moment I go on EVA... oh, you're not... no, Jeb, okay, well, we know it's a low friction surface, Jeb, but... yeah, Jeb's having fun. Come on, Jeb, get up. Whoa! That was slightly trippy. That was a bit too trippy. For a brief moment, Jeb saw the universe. Maybe you were right, chap. Maybe Jeb was smoking something in there. It seems entirely plausible. Right, take surface sample. To my mind, the remove helmet button is worryingly close to the take surface sample button. You wouldn't want to accidentally click on remove helmet, believe me. What's the chance it'll fall on my Kerbal's head? I don't know. It is slightly worrying how it's rocking around like that. What's today's date? Let's have a look. It is the 21st, I want to say. Oh, that's the first time I've done that this year. I've been so good about putting 2019 instead of 2018, but no. There we go. Right. So there we go. We might even take a little screenshot of this. Our first landing with... wow, Jeb, you need to shave. With a slowly oscillating spacecraft in the background. Okay. I mean, to be fair, in order to go up in a spacecraft designed by me, a little chemical encouragement might be required. That is so precarious looking. Well, I think the minute we get back to Kerbin, we're going to be redesigning this thing. Whoop. No, don't you fall over. Don't you do it. Right. Back home we go. Hopefully we're heading the right way. Can't really tell at the moment. I think we are. No, we're doing a kind of polar orbit at the moment. Which is not really what we want. Well, that should push us round into an equatorial orbit. Not that it hugely matters if it's not exactly like a completely straight equatorial orbit, to be honest. It can be a bit wonky because we just need to get it close enough to return to Kerbin. So we'll let it straighten up a little bit more and then we'll circularize. That's fine, that's straight enough. Oh, I don't know why you're doing that. Just set the node manually, but that's fine. I can still remember how to do that. So we've got just over 2,000 meters a second delta V to return to Kerbin. So yeah, complete overkill. More than enough. Oh, unlock the engine gimbal. That's true. It helps. We've still got the reaction control wheel that's built into the command pod. But you might as well have the extra maneuverability that comes from the having the gimbal. Now what I think I might do, just to be on the safe side, is have Jebediah EVA and grab the science, which I could have done on the surface actually, but there we go. Just in case these things overheat on re-entry. If it explodes, it's not going to be an issue if it's all in the command capsule. Although if the command capsule explodes, then that might be an issue. Oh, I've just realised I didn't do the mystery goo. You know what? We'll just add it to the long litany of failure that... I mean, I could cheat and take a mystery goo reading just now, but... yeah, the contract doesn't call for it, so no. I was going to do that on the surface, and then I forgot I had it. So, whoops. Never mind. We'll just add that to the long list of failures that dogged this mission. And yet, despite that, we've successfully done it all the same. Somehow. Just about. We've bodged our way to success. And that's the best you can hope for in Kerbal Space Program. Oh, and we need to get the panels out as well, actually. Let's abort the auto warp. Oh. Okay, that might have frozen for a second. Because I accidentally clicked outside the screen. Yeah, I forgot that I'd put the mystery goo container on there. I did most of the things and I got most of the science I wanted to get, so missing one thing is not that big of a deal. I've honestly been getting most of my science thanks to the mission strategy. Not mission strategy, the admin strategy. Because you can select various, like you can swap reputation to get bonus money and swap money to get bonus science and stuff like that. So I'm making less money than I would be otherwise, but unless you're purposefully decreasing the amount of money that contracts give you, it's not hard to make money in career mode. The default is relatively generous. So we'll wave goodbye to Minmus. It's not bad looking craft, this. Once you get to the upper stage anyway. So I'll have to do a fair bit of time warping. And our periapsis is a fair ways off intersecting with Kerbin itself, but we can soon fix that. So we just need to get that to the point where it's intersecting with the atmosphere, which at the moment it very definitely is not. $600k, $500k, $400k. Yeah, fair ways out. Oh, okay. I accidentally hit the wrong button again. Not that it really matters, but I might actually... That might be a slightly steep approach into the atmosphere. So I might just do a little corrective burn, which is fine, because I have more than enough delta V. I was wondering why the keyboard presses weren't actually registering, but if you're hovering over one of the MechJeb windows, it doesn't. I sometimes forget that. So you have to be careful to... There we go. You have to be careful to have your mouse cursor pointed over the main game window and not over one of the MechJeb windows. Right, we can get rid of that panel. And basically we're just... nope! That was not what I wanted to do. I wanted to time warp and I clicked on the wrong thing. Yes, hello little satellites. We didn't mean to come and say hello to you. Look, I'm not saying that Jeb, you know, is known around Kerbal Space Center for being the person to go to if you need to buy certain recreational plants, but actually no, yeah, I am. That's exactly what I'm saying. And you must know it's good stuff, given how Jeb acts all the time. So the nice thing about having these satellites is you get to see the little dance with all the communication lines going on. Right, where are we? Where's Kerbin? I've lost Kerbin! Oh no! Oh, there it is. It's fine! It's fine, you guys. I wasn't worried. Actually, that might be worth a screenshot. And because we're coming in on a somewhat inclined trajectory, yeah, quite a nice view of the Aurora Australis there. I guess it would still be called the Aurora Australis on Kerbin. Yeah, this all took rather longer. This entire mission has been several months long. So this was not quite as planned, but we did do everything we wanted to do, more or less. Apart from maybe one or two minor screw-ups here and there, and things like forgetting I had a mystery goo container on board. Right, let's do what I usually do and burn off some of my remaining fuel, of which I have plenty, just to kill some velocity before we actually hit the atmosphere. Oh, I can't speed up while we're actually firing the... never mind, not that it matters. Yeah, if this had been using a mod that has any kind of life support, everybody would have died a long time ago, just because it took so much longer than planned. I definitely don't recommend life support mods for new players. It can be an interesting challenge. And I have used them myself in the past, but it also involves a lot more planning, and it gives you a lot less margin for error if things do go wrong. Although there are some kind of life support light mods that will be a bit less harsh, and if you do things wrong, they'll not outright kill your Kerbals, but they'll incapacitate them instead. Right, so we're in the atmosphere. We can set the... Oh, I've accidentally... Never mind. For some reason, the parachute and the final stage were on the same not action group. They were on the same staging group, but the parachute won't try and deploy until we're until it's safe to do so, basically. So it's not going to... I haven't broken the parachute accidentally. Right, we are getting some heating on the Science Junior. So this is why I grabbed the Science out of that, because I thought to myself, it might explode. And I think it's going to explode. Because it's between the heat shield and the... Whoa! And the rest of the craft. Yeah. Well, technically we still have the heat shield, but other things are now going to explode. As long as the capsule itself doesn't explode. Though we're coming a bit close to it, frankly. A little bit uncomfortably close. Maybe I should have had the Science Junior be below the heat shield and just jettisoned it as part of the upper stage, but never mind. It's fine. A few minor explosions on what was otherwise a totally flawless mission. Totally flawless, you guys. So flawless. It was my most flawless mission yet. Actually, no, I've had missions that have gone far more wrong than this one. Hey, Kerbin. Well, I haven't seen you around for a while. Not that I, you know, stream on a massively regular basis or anything these days, but still. Well, anybody that's been disappointed at the lack of things exploding when they weren't supposed to explode in the previous couple of streams, you're welcome. You're very much welcome. You can just hear the remains of the rest of the craft exploding in the distance there. Right, we don't actually have... That's not part of the craft anymore, that heat shield, I don't think. It's just stuck to the bottom through air resistance. It's fine! It's fine. It was flawless. It was a perfect mission. I don't know what you're talking about. We can actually time warp this a little bit until we get closer to the ground. Just close enough. At least it's not like a previous stream. Was it the first one or the second one where I had to go back to a quick save because I didn't deploy a parachute in time, and we had a slightly terminal velocity bit of litho braking. Very terminal. Oh, you were here a week ago. Okay, I just didn't notice then, clearly. In my usual very attentive self, or my usual attentive ways. Yeah, I don't know why the staging got mixed up on this one. It wasn't previously, but sometimes if you change something on the craft, sometimes it messes up your staging. Even if it was fine beforehand, it doesn't necessarily put the staging back exactly the way it was previously. And bump! Touchdown on a completely perfect mission that didn't go wrong in any way whatsoever. Completely flawless. And that was a whole lot of science from Minmus, even though I missed out on getting more. I could have had more. I should have had more. Gosh darn it. Right. First thing we do is... oh, yeah, okay, fair enough, Kerbin Flyer. Yeah, first thing we're going to do is fix the staging on this. Yeah, for some reason it's put the parachute in that final... That's weird. Yeah, it's at some point it's messed up the staging of this. So it did do it that time. I was removing the extra science instruments that I'd previously added. I don't know. I don't know. Oh, and also we have to fix this. Right, what's the best way to do this? If we temporarily add... Let's just temporarily dump that in as a sub-assembly. Right, do I need to change the scale a little maybe, or just the positioning? That's peeking out the bottom of the shroud, so we don't want that. Let's try that. Detox Jeb. I think it's been tried, but with no amount of success. Well, that's new. Now it's just hovering. Okay. I might just have to ditch this whole thing and stick the landing gear on the outside, maybe. I don't know. If I scale that down, although that's a bit... Doesn't give a lot of clearance to the engine bell, but let's try that. Actually, I'll leave that open. Why wouldn't I leave that open? I don't know. The science I brought back will be enough, more than enough for another couple of science nodes, so we'll be able to do that station contract next. At which point I think we'll probably finish the stream once I've done that. Right. Hurrah! That probably extends. It doesn't give a lot of ground clearance, but if I've landed correctly, it doesn't matter anyway. Right, excellent. There we go. Fixed. I know that works now. It worked the first time I used it. I must have tweaked it in between. Right, and this time I'm going to very carefully check my staging. Right, yes, that's the SRBs, and then yes, yes, yes. Right, that's all correct. Right, so we'll have a quick check of our contracts that are available. Just to see if there's any tasty ones that have popped up, because of course we've cleared out a few. And then we'll have to get some science. Rescue Linlaw from the surface of the Mun. I don't think we'll be doing that just yet. Tourist contract. Land on the Mun. Orbit around Minmus. That one's worth a decent chunk of change. I'll definitely take that one. Plant a flag on Minmus. That one's worth a lot. We'll take that. Explore the Mun. Transfer any crew between vessels near the Mun. Well, we can combine that with some other contract, so that'll be extra bonus cash. Position satellite in specific orbit of the Mun. we'll take that. Do I want any more tourist contracts? I do still have one active. Don't know if I want to try and combine that with another tourist contract. No, I don't think I want any of the rest of these. So let's have a quick look at the Kerbin station contract, because this is what we're going to work on next. Build a new orbital station that can support 11 Kerbals. And it has to have the capacity, well, not just the capacity, it has to be carrying 4,000 units of liquid fuel. And then the usual things of it. It needs a docking port, an antenna, and solar panels. So this node we want for the bigger command pods and the cupola, particularly for the cupola. And also that's one of the new things it gives us, is the from making histories, it's supposed to be like the LEM, only it's not the LEM, it's the MEM. And maybe some further rocketry parts. Bigger rockets might be useful. This is smaller rockets, not really what we want for the time being. That's fuel tanks, but that's not really a priority. Ah, there we go, 2.5 meter protective aero shell. We want that for sure. So we'll get that science node. There's also some other bits and pieces in there, including the standard Clampotron docking port, so yeah, that'll be useful. The advanced grabbing unit, we don't need that yet. That's plane parts. More plane parts. Bigger heat shield. Medium landing gear. We can get one more of these nodes. Advanced reaction wheel. Bigger monoprop tank. That might be the one to go for. Or else we could maybe get this one, which would give me better antennas. Let's go for that one. Let's go for better antennas and structural parts. And the advanced probe core. Or a more advanced probe core. Yeah, let's take that one. So there we go. That's a nice extra collection of parts. See you, Moritos. Thanks for joining us. So this was, I can't even remember who the contract was for. But what should we call it? I might just be really boring and well, I could call it like Kerbin 1 or something like that, but actually we've been doing a kind of avian theme for my naming so far. Let's call it Crow Station. Why not? So we now have a variety of different. We're not going to use this, but I just want to look. Ah, it has built-in RCS. Built-in RCS ports. That's neat. I like that. There's probably modded ones that do the same thing, but still. We are largely doing this without modded parts. Mark 2 command pod. That was one of the things we got, wasn't it? Does that not have different styles? No. That's 2 Kerbals. The Mark 1-3. Which is just expanded one. So does that fit on top of the 1.25 meter? Parts, or is that some different scale. No, that's some different scale. Yeah, it looks like you need one of these. It's 2.5 meter. Yeah, okay, it's 2.5 meter. Now I'm just looking at the new toys now. Mark II lander can. So this is one of the original parts that's been reskinned a bit. Rather different looking windows. Interesting. That has a different pair of different styles as well. Oh! Hello! There's a rover variant. Oh, that's nice. I like that. Okay, that's different. So no longer do you have to either rely on mods or bodge one of the existing capsules if you want to do a rover. I like that. We'll have to use that at some point. Anyway, right. But we're going to go with the cupola as our kind of main part, I guess. Dump out the monoprop. So 11, was it 11 Kerbals? I don't even know if I have 11 Kerbals at the moment. But what we will need is what we could do is a pair of these and then somehow add in one of these crew cabins somewhere, and that would give me 11 exactly. But not quite like this, obviously. We'll bodge some things around. I mean, we want to do this with a relatively small part count, and obviously the fewer parts, the less expensive it is. But we might even incorporate, if we have this as a kind of middle tube section, we might even incorporate some of these adapter tanks and use them for liquid fuel. Well, that's a bit on the long side. What does that one look like? No, that's not the correct scale, is it? I don't have the... there is a mod that lets you, by default... not by default, it lets you change what kind of tanks you want things to be. So you might have... like, you might plonk down a tank and then you switch it. So I think it might literally be called something like fuel switcher. So you might have it only be oxidizer or only be liquid fuel. It's a very handy mod, but I don't have it installed. Right, it would be this one, but scaled up, I guess. Well, that's still kind of wrong. Yeah, I'm not sure what part this tank is meant to go with, unless it's one of the new crew capsule things. Well, let's just use one of the flat adapters then, and we'll do something else for the fuel tanks. Structural, there we go. I remembered in the end. That's the handy part of having tweak scale, is I can just do that. And what I can potentially do is we'll just cap it at the other end with another one of these, say, and have the docking port be there. I'm not going for anything super fancy with this station. I undoubtedly could make it look a lot more swish. But potentially we'll get contracts later on to basically add things to the station, so it will look a little more organic. We're not planning this as like, oh, I've got this big station in mind and it's going to look like this eventually. Those parts don't quite play nice with the I don't quite sit flush. There we go. Clip that inside slightly. Right, a small amount of clipping. That's fine. I'm okay with this. Right, so my idea is I'm going to have a docking port, maybe a north-south connector coming out of this interconnector tube. It's not really an interconnector tube, it's a crew cabin, but we're using it for that purpose. I could, of course, just scale up the crew cabin, but I've always found that idea a bit silly, and there's some of the command pods that you can scale using tweak scale as well, but again, feels a bit cheesy doing that. It's always been one of my house rules, I guess you could call it, is not using tweak scale on any components that house crew. So structural, and we actually have the radial attachment point, which is what we want. We'll just do a single north-south for one of those. No, it's still structural I want, isn't it? Maybe a structural fuselage. Oh, I keep forgetting they're awfully fussy. I don't know why the structural fuselage parts in particular are that fussy, but they are. Maybe we don't want to use that. We have some short versions that are as part of making history, though. Which we can... I think you can scale them without having to use MechJeb, which is not MechJeb, tweak scale. I think these ones might be scalable in the default game. Ah! Now that's handy. That's very handy. You can actually set how long you want them to be. It's a pity it's not procedural, so you can't kind of click and drag how far along you want it to go. But yeah, that works. And then we have a pair of clampertrons on the end for visiting spacecraft. There we go. I mean, it's not fancy, but it's functional. We just need it to be functional, basically. Yeah, what I'm going to do for fuel is for efficiency's sake, we'll use the Mark I fuselages. We can maybe even taper off the ends with the NCS adapter cones. Although that might be a bit, I don't know. The thing is though, 4,000 is 10 of these, so we might have to do a separate... Ah! I had a thought, you know, what we could do. I could use another new part. What I'll do, I think, is send this up empty in terms of its in terms of liquid fuel. Oh, I keep forgetting. There is, in fact, I now have access. I didn't even have to scale that. We'll just use the properly sized part, which would be better. Yeah, there we go. We'll use the black and white variant. Yeah, it'll be cheaper using the properly scaled part. There we go. Right, that's better. It's fine. Yeah, I was going to use one of the new, well, newish Making History parts that you get, except I can't remember where it's lurking. Engine plate, there we go. That's what we want. So we give ourselves 5 nodes, and I think it's got the same, I think that dictates the shroud length. I'm not entirely sure. We'll figure that out in a second. But that means I can then get oh, that's going to involve a heck of a lot of clipping though. I mean, I could do it that way. Maybe not. Let's not clip things quite so egregiously as we were going to before. Right, let's make sure these are all empty. We'll have to launch it empty, I think. Well, we don't have to, but it'll be easier to launch it empty and then send the fuel up separately. I could scale, I could clip into the like I could, the thing is I'm trying to deliberately keep the part count from getting way too high, because if I did 50 bazillion of like say this scale, then it starts to take the part count up to very high levels. And if I'm adding bits to this station later on, the higher the part count, then the harder the time the physics engine has with it, the lower your frame rate. So I'm trying to keep that as a limitation. So that's actually going to be more than, in terms of capacity. We're not going to exactly be 4,000 units of liquid fuel in terms of the capacity, but that's fine. The thing is, we need, I don't know how nicely the game will play with what idea I have here, because I don't have any of the quad couplers or anything like that, the adapter plates. So we're going to, nope. So the idea is that I have the nodes match up there, and then theoretically we can just slap one of those on the bottom. And then a clampertron. And then we can have all the rest of what we want to do in terms of communications gear and the rest. It does look a little I don't know. Can we try and move things in slightly, just so it sits within the confines of the plate? Oh, it does at the top, but not at the bottom. They're not necessarily going to be rotated the same way, are they? Right, that's not supposed to be sticking out one side more than the other. Nope. Right, we might just have to bodge this severely. Severe bodgings. It's not the cleanest way of doing things, but it's fine. I might need to move these tanks in a little further. Right, that's fine. That's pretty much where I want it to be. So it's a bit of a stick, but we'll add things to it later on, because there will undoubtedly be contracts to expand the station. Because once you've put stations up, the game tends to give you contracts every so often to then to do more with them. But we'll make sure that's auto-strutted to the root part, so that's fine. That should help. It looks silly. It's not elegant exactly, but once it's up there, I think it'll look better. Right, another thing we're probably going to want on is some reaction control wheels, so I'll actually put them in a position where I can hide them. Because we're not going to put any RCS on this station. Right, we've got the usual thing of it. Yeah, that's a little... If you're looking, you'll see that it doesn't quite match. Some parts don't like to be hidden. Sort of works, kind of, a bit, maybe. It's fine. It looks like Roma's beer can. I mean, the alternative is to have... God, what's the biggest fuel tank I have at the moment? I would need, what, 3 of these? It would make this stack even bigger. Doesn't necessarily have to have them like that, of course, but 3 of those is even more mass. And you're taking out the oxidizer, but yeah, those are bigger tanks. And it starts to look even more ungainly when you're trying to have those. I mean, I suppose I could have them kind of like a central one and then 2 coming off the sides. But as a hub, you know, as a first bit of a station, I think this looks a little bit cleaner. Does asparagus staging still work? Yeah, you can still do asparagus staging for extra launch efficiency, I think. As far as I know, that's still a thing. Right, so that's the liquid fuel and the passengers taken care of, and we've also gotten some control wheels. And so that really just leaves things like lights and antennas and all the rest of it. So we'll put on some floodlights, but we'll scale them down by half. And maybe do the same down at this end. Oh, that's not quite lined up properly. Oh yeah, that lights the centre section. That looks okay. What else do we need? We might even put on some cameras. Now these are definitely not stock parts, but I'm pretty sure the cupola module... In fact, we can just test that. With raster prop monitor, which is one of the mods I have. It basically makes the screens inside your command capsules functional. And it comes along with that camera part. What's a material bay in terms when it comes to bring it on a mission? It's a kind of science experiment, Lasse. I'm not entirely sure what your question is, but yeah, it's a kind of science experiment. So yes, this does have some screens. Okay, that's all I wanted to know. It's one of the ways in which you can get science if you're playing science mode or career mode. But it's also one of the biggest science experiments. So you have to almost design a lander around having it with you. Forgotten where the camera parts are now. Utility, there we go. So my idea is I want to have a camera above each docking port. Or the service bay. Right, it's kind of hard to tell if that's quite oriented how I want it to be. Well, that still seems a bit wonky somehow. How has it put them on so wonky? Let's try that again. Right, there we go. In fact, why did I take the launch clamps off? Because we can give that a very quick test. Service bays can be useful for hiding things like batteries. You can put science experiments in service bays. You can hide landing gear or landing legs in service bays. So there's various things you can do with service bays. In fact, they are one of those parts that once upon a time, if you wanted something like that, you had to use a mod. But these days you don't. Why is it? That's not right. Okay, it's done something weird with the structural tube. We'll figure that out in a second. But there we go. We have cameras. Although it's only showing one camera. Why is it only showing one camera? Yeah, there's various different things, but it should be... We should have two different cameras available. I don't know why it's only showing us one. Also, I guess we'll have to fix the orientation, otherwise that's going to look super weird. Yeah, there's two of them. There's definitely two of them. Oh, do you have to put them down one at a time? Cam 1. I think maybe you do. I've never really used these before, so... I guess it gives them separate IDs. So that should then be Cam 2. Yes. So you have to place them one at a time. You can't use the... symmetry with them. That's not explaining why these parts are misbehaving, unless it just doesn't like working with tweak scale in the mix. Second slider bar doesn't seem to do anything, so I don't know. Let's try that again, see if that's still misbehaving. Hey, Dan Peason. Dampson? I don't know how one says that exactly. We did have a few explosions earlier on that weren't intentional. This has not been an explosion-free stream by any means. Yeah, no, that's wigging out. It does not like those. Okay, we might have to find some other part to use there. Because what it's doing in the service bay is not what it's doing outside of the service. You've got me carrying service bays on the brain now, on the vehicle assembly. Right, that's fine, except it's upside down relative to what I want it to be. But it kind of doesn't matter because we're going to have to swap those around anyway. So the parts they're attached to are not happy. Well, let's just delete those for now. Right, what have we got that can stand in their stead? I mean, talking of service bays, they're about the right size. It looks a little awkward, however. No, that's one of the new. We don't want that. Yeah, I don't know why these structural tubes don't behave. Well, let's just quickly try that one. See if that's doing exactly the same thing as the other kind. Yep, exactly the same thing. I think this is an unintentional interaction with tweak scale. That's the only explanation I can think of. And I didn't need to delete that. Right, we might have to use, oh gosh, like a fuel tank or something, I guess. That'll do. A fuel tank with no fuel. Which is slightly the wrong scale as well, so. That's about right, 1.2. Paranoid now. I'm going to double check this isn't wigging out. There we go. That looks better. And that's enough clearance that we should be able to dock any craft that I need to dock to it. It'll look better once it's on its side, honest guys. It does look a little ungainly when it's upright like that, but yeah. It'll be fine. Hey, oh right. How are you doing? We're just Kerbal contracting at the moment. Right, Oh, I need to. Oh, goodness, I keep taking the thing off when I don't need to. I keep prematurely removing the scaffolding. It would be that way, I think. No, oh, it's so annoying when it does this. You don't grab the right part that you want to. Well, let's try that. I'm trying to get the cameras oriented the right way. Looks like a giant mechanical spider. Okay. You've seen some weird spiders in your time. To my mind, it almost looks a bit more like a squid. Like the fuel tanks look like they could be the arms, you know, grouped together. Well, that would be a very oddly proportioned squid. Right. And the answer is no. It's on its side. Can be annoying trying to deal with orientation. Alright, so it needs to go like 90 degrees clockwise. If the camera parts had a little, like just a little marker on them or something, so you knew that which way was up, it would make life a lot easier. Right, so 90 degrees clockwise would be that way. I really don't need to have external cameras on this. It's just I've never used them before. And the command pods you start off with in this game don't have the usable screens for raster prop monitor to make use of. So it's nice to finally have them. And we can do things like have... There we go. We can do things like have the cameras set up so you can see the you know, ships coming into dock or whatever. So it could, I think it would look rather fancy. You know, you sat there in your cockpit up in space and you switch to this view and you see the approaching ship coming in to do its docking. So yeah, there we go. We're going to do that. So all that's left really, and we definitely can get rid of those this time because there's nothing else we need to test on the launch pad. All that's left is, first off, antenna, and I might do a bit of overkill and have both a relay antenna and I might have the other one, high gain, because that stows away nicely. That's a relay antenna, so what we'll do is we'll also have one of the bog standard sort as well. Is that about the right place? I think it is. That's fine, or do I want them in some different place? I don't know, maybe. If I turn the flag off on this particular one and have them at the sides, it might look a little... Oh, I can't have it on the side and that side because it'll block the hatch. How about I just have them kind of next to each other? Yeah, that's fine, that'll work. And then I think solar panels is the last thing. It doesn't call for having any science experiments on board, and we have got 200 electric charge on there. We might stick on another battery somewhere. Not sure where a good place to do it would be. We hide a battery underneath this docking port, let's say. We'll move that up, or will the battery poke through? It does, okay. That's annoying. I can't actually grab the battery to move it up there. Okay, let's not stick the battery there. Where can we stick the battery? Bear in mind, I'm trying to keep the parts count at being not completely bloated. We're already up to 42 parts on nearly 12 tons of mass. How about one of these, but I just clip it inside somewhere? Could do that. That's exactly 100 charge each. And I'd have to clip it totally inside, I suppose. I don't like the one of the things that I think mods definitely do better is all the mods that add batteries make the battery packs look like proper battery packs rather than giant household batteries. I've always felt that looks a bit out of place, so I definitely don't mind hiding these, at least somewhat, because it just doesn't really fit with the aesthetic of the rest of the game at all. It just seems a bit odd, frankly. Right, we'll use the 1x6 panels. I don't think we'll do anything fancy with the scaling here. Let's say a pair there, maybe another pair there. Although that flap does cover that. There we go, that looks a bit better. What do we reckon? 2 sets, or do we do a 3rd set? Or I could have just one, but I scale it right up. I could set like some ones here and then just like go crazy, go nuts, 200%. Although that does rather up the cost quite a lot. I think maybe we want to keep it out of the way of the of any craft that are docking potentially. So I think we'll just stick with ordinary 100% ones. Maybe do a 3rd set there. I think that looks fine. What do we reckon? 3 lots of solar panels? I'll have to shift that antenna though, but that's fine. Yeah, I think you're right, chat. I think 3 looks better. I might move the antennas down to this section then, just so it looks all a little less crowded. It's not going to block that light too much. It's a bit tricky finding a spot that won't actually. That should do. Right, that's fine. I'm not really going for any kind of realism, like realistic looking space station here. This is all just meant to be kind of as is. Oh, there is one very last touch in that we want a MechJeb on here. Just for the information that MechJeb can give. Where do we want to put you, MechJeb? Squirrel you away somewhere. I guess we could just kind of stick you next there. That's fine. Right, 51 parts think the only things we might conceivably eliminate is maybe we could take a few of the lights out. I don't know. Right, do we really need four sets of lights? Yeah, let's remove the top set. Let's just have that bottom set of lights. There's a few less parts to contend with. Okay, I think we are basically good to go in terms of then building a launch vehicle for this bad boy. Just out of interest, 11.8, how much does it weigh if I suddenly fill it with liquid fuel? Yeah, you can see the mass starts to climb quite a lot, 35, nearly 36 tons. So I think we'll be launching this dry. Because it more than triples the weight. Did I remember the kettle and the biscuit tin? Yep, they're in there. Probably, maybe, I don't know. Right, what we can do... We can maybe even... Now let's do it properly and have a decoupler, because if you're using one of these, you don't necessarily need to use a decoupler, but we'll do it properly and use an actual decoupler. Right, oh, those are staged as separators. We definitely don't want to accidentally do any kind of separation for those, so that's fine. Aerodynamics, payload, there we go. 2.5 meter shell. Which adds a bit of weight itself, but that's not too bad, is that? We could even maybe make that a little bit slimmer. It's one of those things where you never quite know. Oh, a little bit too far. Because the smaller the fairing, of course, the less. There we go. That just covers the docking ports. That's what we need it to be at, really. So that saves us a little bit of weight. Right, this is going to be a little bit of an outsized load getting it into orbit. We don't have to get it into any particular orbit though, but I will get it at least into a circular equatorial one. It's not really a fuel station. I mean, it could potentially be used as one for nuclear rockets once we get nuclear rocket engines, but oh no, that's not what we wanted to do. I should probably stop fidgeting with it. Nope. It's because I had it there we go. The snap turned on. Right, presuming it's not going to crack in itself, which it might do, you never know. Let's go about building a launch vehicle for this. So we're going to want... This is one of those cases where we can actually have an ascent stage that we deliberately try and bring back down. So, what am I after? Command and control. Electrical. We're just going to clip these parts inside. Or I could actually... I could not... cheat. I could actually use a proper service bay. There we go. which adds weight and the rest of it, but yeah, would suit my purposes just fine. What actually weighs less? What does a service bay weigh? 0.3. Just wondering if I had a instead of a service bay, if I had a because this is an option as well. I'd have to add some structural parts, but just did it like this. Well, sometimes it can be a bit finicky in terms of getting it to be an inline. There we go. Got to get it just right. So I could do that. Question is, which weighs more? So that's 14.5. 14.39. So the actual proper service bay weighs less, so we'll just go with that. Not exactly big margins, but still. Might as well take what we can get. So we're going to shove a MechJeb and an antenna in there. Because we've got the reaction wheel, we'll be able to basically turn it around and deorbit it with whatever fuel is remaining. So that's fine, that's all tucked away in there. I'm not even going to bother with solar panels. Will this go up unkerbaled? I think the contract means I'll have to have 11 Kerbals actually in it, but I'm not 100% certain. It says have a facility supporting at least 11 Kerbals.
So be it, Jedi.
Hey, Jingles! How are you? We're just doing some late night Kerbal. Well, sort of late night Kerbal. Not even that late night at this point, but you know. Kerbal, anyway. There is Kerbaling. I'm building a space station. Which is not the most pretty space station ever, but it'll look better once some extra bits are bolted on the side. At the moment, we're just doing exactly what the contract to build it tells us to do. Right. We might want to throw in a few struts. I've just had a thought. Paint it red, then it'll go faster. Ah, orc logic. Oh, we can't do that because we have to actually. There we go. Few extra struts. You can never go wrong with a few extra struts. Right. Fuel tanks and an upstage engine. 32 tons. See how much mass just having extra bit of fuel adds. I've not used this engine before. Although I don't think that's really 1.875, that's a weird scale. Presumably there's some 1.875 meter tank that corresponds to, but right, 1600 meters a second delta V. What's the stats for that engine? 293.10. So slightly better on the ascent, but less efficient in a vacuum compared to the skipper.
Your business is
actually gives less power than the
appreciated.
skipper as well. 1625. We might well use a skipper for that upper stage. What did it say? Yeah, you get a tiny bit more delta V. This actually gives better thrust to weight. Which, given that this is the engine we'll be using to finalise the circularisation burn, yeah, we might actually want the better thrust to weight. I don't know. Slightly cheaper as well. Okay, let's go with that. I think that should be enough for circularization and deorbiting, so long as we design it so that we're getting to that final stage and not using all of that for circularization. But that was poorly articulated. But I know what I mean. Might be that nobody else knows what I mean, but I know what I mean. Right, that should do for an upstage. And crucially, we'll be able to deorbit it and bring it back down. We might even want a tiny bit of monoprop. I've just had that thought. A tiny bit of monoprop. The tiniest bit of monoprop. That is a very small monoprop tank. Not even sure if that is completely centered, but anyway, I'm just trying to keep the mass centered as much as possible. And right, not even going to do the normal monoprop, not monoprop, the normal RCS clusters. We're just going to have 2 of these for the literal and express purpose of just pushing it away once we've gotten the thing into where we want it to be. So it's just going to push itself away from the station so it can drift away and then get to the point where it's going to deorbit itself. Just so we don't have this final section of the booster stuck there next to the station in perpetuity. Right, we might make this bottom section orange, just because we can. And we might, the asparagus staging was mentioned earlier on. We might have a go at that. So we want a nice meaty engine for our main booster, and that's probably the skipper? I'm not entirely sure. Might need to use another one of these. Right, TWR 101, right, that's fine. We could even... That has 2 gimbals. The engine's separately gimbal on this one. That's interesting. We'll actually slightly limit the thrust of that one, just so it's not completely nuts. 1.5 is a good level. So that doesn't, like, 1500 meters a second delta V, that's not going to get us very far up. This as is would not get us to orbit. I've just realised another thing we're going to... We could even have this be a fully recoverable, well, not fully recoverable, but a recoverable stage by dint of sticking a parachute on it. I've just had that thought. I have that stage all the way at the top. Anyway, right. Just so I'm spending slightly less money getting it up there. Right, so yes, what we're going to do is a bit of asparagus staging, which is a little fiddly, but gives you some quite decent efficiency. I think 4 tanks should be enough, and we can even use some of the new tanks that came with making history. I've not used yet. That Z fighting's quite ugly. There we go. Yeah, the textures do clip into each other sometimes in a rather ugly fashion. Right, fuel tanks. Right, these ones. And we can have a nice little Korolev cross going on. Although it wouldn't actually be a Korolev cross because that would imply we're dropping all of them at the same time, which we might not necessarily do. Also, I think we want to use different radial decouplers. There we go. Oh, that's not quite straight. Yeah, attaching things to these can be a little fiddly. Have to make sure you've actually attached to them and not the tank underneath. Guess we'll have them be about flush with the bottom of the tank. So you can just basically why is it showing those as... Oh, are those SRBs? Wait, what? Why is it showing them as... Oh, I see. The SRBs, it's got built-in... Ah, clever. Okay. It's got built-in separators. You can add little separator motors, but this one has built-in separators that will push them away. So we'll stage those in the same stage as the actual separators. But yeah, they're basically little engines, little solid rocket engines built in that push them away so they don't collide with your craft. Okay. You do get separate Separatron motors, as they're called in the game, as a thing later on. But anyway, so yeah, before I interrupted myself by noticing that thing, yeah, we can just slap some engines on the bottom of these and it would be fine. Some LVT-30s would probably do just fine. And normally what happens is these would all drain down at the same time, and obviously the main tank is being drained by the main engines firing, and it's fine, it works. But what happens if you start throwing some fuel lines in is you can have these exterior tanks feeding the main tank and have them drop in sequence, or in a sequence, so that the efficiency of your fuel usage actually goes up by quite a bit. But I don't know, having stuck these on and having seen how much fuel they actually have, I'm not 100% sure they will do as is. We might have to scale them up a bit. So this won't be a Korolev cross if we do this, because that would be all of them dropping at once. But if we drop them in the proper sequence, and you can go completely mad with asparagus staging. You can have concentric rings of asparagus staged engines and the like, and go a bit nuts with the whole thing, but we're not going to go quite that nuts. We'll do... Maybe make it a little more aerodynamic. So, we need to set up the staging correctly so that these tanks basically get used up and drop off first. And as you've used the fuel, you're basically then dropping the entire thing, so you're not lugging around dead mass. That's the whole idea of well, it's the whole idea of staging generally is you're not lugging around dead mass with you. But asparagus staging is just a different way of doing it. You can't really do in real life, thanks to the difficulties of pumping fuel around. It's quite a tricky thing to do. This, yeah, I think you're right, Corbin. I think this is probably not enough as is. So what we can do is we can either scale these up to be a little bit bigger, or we can add even more of them. And I'm actually tempted to just add more of them, because adding more of them... Well, first off, let's try scaling up. Let's scale up to 2.5 meters, at which point the engines start to be struggling a bit. But in terms of total delta V, 4800... I don't know if that's going to be... if even that's going to be enough. scale those up. Yeah, that's definitely enough thrust, but severely cuts into the fuel efficiency. I'm aiming for about a thrust to weight of about 1.5 off the pad. Right, total vacuum is at the moment 4,800. But what I might do is just slap an extra fuel tank in there onto that main stage. Also slightly fix this. It's going to be quite an expensive launch, but oh, that's supposed to be attaching there. We're still clearing away in profit in terms of what the contract is going to give us. Right, 4,900 meters a second. And 1.45. Let's tweak the engines up slightly. I'm aiming for a TWR off the ground of about 1.5. 1.52. Perfect. Right, this still might not be quite enough because it's not exactly the most aerodynamic craft. And it's not necessarily going to be able to... not necessarily something I'll be able to... game? Why did you do that? Launch efficiently. Yeah, sometimes once you start to get to bigger part counts, the editor is a little... gets a little uncooperative, a little janky. Right, what does that do to our centre TWR? That's fine, because by the time we've dropped these exterior tanks, that TWR should be over 1. Right, so I'm going to check all of our staging is correct. 80,000, that's not bad. It's quite a large thing that we're launching, so 80,000 feels not bad at all. So let's give this a go. It's a funny looking English flag. It is, isn't it, Jingles? It's very strange. This is not the proper launch, this is just making sure it's not going to explode. Because apart from anything else, we need considerably more astronauts on board. Right. Let's see how we do. We might have to put some struts on these. These are a little bit too wobbly for my liking. We're coming off the pad reasonably cleanly though, that's fine. I'll start to turn a little. It is fighting us though. It's going to want to flip, so we'll have to be careful about that. We can't turn too low down in the atmosphere, or we can't turn too sharply too low down in the atmosphere. Right, so that's how those work. It's fine, they're just going to fall on the Space Center. We give people hard hats for a reason. We'll definitely need some strutting or some auto-strutting or something. But this is really just to see... Well, I don't think this will be enough Delta V. This is really just to see how far short we are. Auto-strutting, you've got your actual strut parts that you can stick on, but the game lets you essentially add invisible struts as well. You have to turn on advanced tweakables as an option, however. Right, so let's see how we do with our main engines. We're now just about at TWR of 1.0. So we're only just getting to a thruster weight of 1. At this point. It is also a very, very wobbly craft. I'm going to have to start turning a bit more and see how it handles. This is looking alright so far, though. As long as this final stage can burn us into an orbit that's satisfactory. And I'm aiming for maybe around about 100-kilometer orbit. Or maybe around 90 to 100, something around that. So this just needs to push us most of the way there, not all the way there. I'll just try and flatten things out a little bit now. It really is wobbly. I'm just making small corrections here because it bounces rather alarmingly otherwise. I can probably move this stage here. There we go. You actually pick up some delta V once you shed the exterior shell, the aero shell, because of course that has weight. It's generally safe to do so above 50 kilometers. Right, we still aren't at an orbital apoapsis yet, and we're almost out of fuel. It's only another 20 odd seconds on this burn. It's a rather ungainly craft, but launching something this tall was always going to be a little challenging. Right, we're above 70 km, but we're going to keep burning. We'll try for an orbit of 90 kilometers. That's away. '85, '86, '87, '88, '89, '90. Right, 91 is fine. That's close enough. Circularize. Wow, okay, well, apparently I completely overestimated how much delta V I would need, or else that was a much better launch than I thought it was going to be. Which means I've got so much fuel left over for manoeuvring. I could even replace this with a smaller tank then, which I think is what we'll do in the editor. Well, this works. We need to do some auto strutting and maybe one or two little tweaks here and there. But yeah, this launcher actually works more or less as is. I think I'll action group the solar panels and the like as well, so I don't have to click on them all individually to extend solar panels and the like. Okay, that's good. That was a good test flight. Excellent. This went rather more smoothly than the first part of this stream. Right, so we'll auto strut that to the root part, and then we're going to want some like actual struts, I think. Structural, there we go. So these bottom parts of the things are rather wobbly. Oh, I keep doing that. With the struts, you have to have it selected how many you want to have in the symmetry before you actually place them. Oh, it's really fiddly trying to get them to line up how you want sometimes. Right, that's as close to straight as we're going to get, I think. What else was there? Oh yes, we're going to swap out that fuel tank for this one. And of course this is going to have the effect of, because I'm lifting less, it actually then increases the delta V of the lower stages. Might have that be orange, just to differentiate the two parts. Okay, so I think this more or less works how I want it to, which is fantastic. Action groups I need to do. So I'll set action group 1 for all of the solar panels, and then probably action group 2 for both of the antennae. Toggle that and toggle that, that's fine. Right, now the real question, we're going to have to go back to the astronaut complex for this, the real question is, do I even have enough Kerbal noughts to send up? Right, I have exactly 11 plus 2 tourists. Okay. Now the thing with this is I'm then going to have to run missions to bring them back down again. So that's also going to cut into my profit margin, but that'll be far cheaper to do. I'll do that off stream. I won't make you all sit here and watch as I bring them all down one by one. Just out of interest, how much is this contract bringing me in? About 130k, and I'm spending 80,000 of that. I can probably combine the contracts to bring them back down again with other things. And even if it isn't profitable, even if I'm not making a profit, I've still got more than enough. Like, I've got over 3 million Kerbucks or whatever they're called at this point. So yeah, that shouldn't be an issue. Oh, there's another rescue contract I can... No, that's one I've already got. Never mind. I thought I was looking at the other tab. Okay, so let's do this. It'll be... Wait, which one is it? It's never quite clear which one is the current one, which one's the auto-saved one. See you, Hilty. Thanks for joining us. Right. So, all of the Kerbals. In fact, we had more than enough. I thought when it said 13 it was counting the tourists as well, but it wasn't. So we have 2 left over. You know what, we can do a little swap then. We can make sure we've at least got some pilots available for further missions. Most of these, I think, in fact, all of these are Kerbals I've rescued. I don't think I've hired a single Kerbal. Oh no, that's not strictly true. Urkal. I hired Urkal. And the rest of I've just rescued. So, this is totally how you would launch a space station with 11 people on board. It's definitely how you would do it. It's completely safe and approved by whatever the Kerbal equivalent of the health and safety executive is. Actually, I don't think the Kerbals have an equivalent of the health and safety executive somehow. Or OSHA if you're American, because I know that's the American equivalent. Oh, I forgot to move that staging down, but that's fine. Right, now I just need to basically have a launch like I had last time and not massively screw it up, and it should be fine. There we go, no wobble this time, so the struts are doing their work as intended. and it is wobbling a bit less as well. So that's good. So yeah, we have a lot of Kerbals on board right now. This is almost our entire space program. So if it all explodes and everybody dies, then yeah. Well, I don't know how the parachute snuck into that stage, but that's fine. Doesn't affect things at all. I'll have to do a rocket at some point that has a proper Korolev cross with these tanks, just because it'll look cool. Oh, we didn't... Okay, something went wrong with the staging there. What the heck? The stages were swapped round somehow? Let's double check that. That shouldn't have happened. That was a wait what moment? For sure. Right. Okay, yeah, literally the stages got swapped round. And for some reason the fuel lines are also messed up. So hang on, let's just fix this, because that's not right. Yeah, okay, the launch clamps blocked the launch clamps messed up the fuel lines. Sneaky. Right. So it should be dropping the... Yeah, so it wasn't the staging, it was the launch clamps messing things up. So yep, those two will drop first and then the two ones on the side. That's fine, okay. And I don't have to redo the crew. Okay, good, launch. The staging was fine, it was adding launch clamps that screwed things up. Just because, why not? Totally fine. Yeah, I was wondering why your auto staging wasn't working, and it's because it was trying not to drop engines that were still firing. Which it will try not to do. But considering that my designs usually take at least a couple of test flights to get the amount of delta V and the rest of it correct, yeah, that was not bad. Basically getting it on the first try, design-wise. There we go. I could theoretically put parachutes on those, but we get out of physics range, or they get out of physics range of the rocket before they hit the ground, so we wouldn't actually be able to recover them. Although there is a mod that lets you recover things if you have the like if you have parachutes on the stages, basically, and set them correctly. Right, 11 kilometers, 12 kilometers, looking good so far. Having this engine's quite handy from the I'm not even sure what the Bobcat is supposed to be exactly, if it's an analogue of a Soviet engine. Because some of the parts have a distinctly Soviet flavour. There we go. Second outboard stage. We can start to come over a bit more now that we're getting out of the thicker parts of the atmosphere. So like last time, we'll aim for about 90 kilometres. The contract itself doesn't specify anything about the location of our station. Oh, and of course, as I pointed out very early on, and which I've kind of managed to forget somehow, we need to also have 4,000 units of liquid fuel. So this isn't me going to be finishing the contract strictly speaking, in this stream, but it's fine. That'll be a bit tedious. That'll be me designing a fuel tanker to bring up 4,000 units of liquid fuel. So yeah, that's something I'll do off stream. That'll be a bit tedious. I can actually stage the fairing. Current apogee is about 82 kilometers, so we're going to push that out to 90 and cut the engines, and then just do what we did last time, basically. Yeah, taking fuel up is absolutely not efficient. One of the things you can do once you've unlocked some of the later tech nodes is get drilling and refining equipment. You can basically build orbital refineries around other bodies to then make fuel, and so you're not having to always take fuel with you to other planets. You can basically set up a refueling infrastructure throughout the rest of the Kerbin system. But once you get to that stage, it can get a little bit tedious, because you have to yourself switch to those craft. You have to then go down, you have to mine the ore, you have to bring the ore back up to orbit, you have to process the ore, and you have to repeat that ad nauseum. And like I say, it can get a little bit tedious. So this wasn't quite as apparently efficient a launch as the previous one, but we're still going to have more than enough fuel to get to orbit. Use the fuel ferry to take the Kerbals down. I'll probably do something along those lines, Corbin. Yeah. We can actually turn our cameras on, so we'll have the nav ball, and there we go. So one's looking up and the other's looking down. That's a really nice little thing of raster prop monitor though, being able to do that. Having the external cameras. Oh. Talking of cameras, it went a bit nuts there, but okay. And there we are. Well, have it do a little corrective maneuver. But apart from the fuel, as you can see, we have done all parts of this contract. So that's all that remains, is bringing the fuel up. And this can be the core of future expansions, this bit of the station that I'm setting up now. It'll look nicer once it's got some extra bits bolted onto the side, trust me. At least I hope it will. So what I'll do is the final bit for the stream is I'll deorbit the booster stage, although we'll first use it to make sure we're in an exactly equatorial orbit as well, because I don't think yeah, we're very slightly off. So heck, I didn't even need this fuel tank. I could have had the smallest fuel tank and it would have been fine. If I was going to send this up full of fuel though, I would have needed a much bigger lifting vehicle. Because it as I pointed out, would have tripled the weight of what we were trying to launch. Right, change inclination. So yeah, we need to burn a tiny bit of delta V doing that, but that's fine. And now that I've got this in orbit, I can start to use it as a staging post for things like Kerbal rescue missions. So that might even be worth a quick screenshot. I can have a quick flick through, see what everyone else is seeing. This is the most Kerbals I've launched at once in quite a while. Oh, that's true. You're right, Korpenfliger. I can actually transfer some of my liquid fuel over, but I'm still going to need enough to actually have this thing be able to get to where I want it to, of course. Right. We're very, 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 very slightly off the equator by like a tiny fraction, but not enough to actually care about. So that's fine. So there we are, the core of my station. Do we want a proper name for it? I'll just leave it as Crow Station for now. Just so I don't accidentally set the engine going while I'm doing this fuel transfer. If I fill up one of these, that should leave more than enough delta V for getting back down again. And that's a little bit less fuel I have to take up with me. In fact, we might even try and squeeze out another, say, 100 units of fuel. Because once we've detached that, this thing will have so much delta V going for it. Maybe take a quick screenshot. What angle looks best? That's not bad. Right, so next stage. And we can I can remember which. There we go. RCS control. There's the whole point of me putting that RCS on here in the first place. And yeah, this has got still about 400 meters a second delta V, so that is more than enough to deorbit. And the whole idea with it having parachutes is that we'll be able to successfully get it back down again as well. So yeah, it looks a little ungainly at the moment, but once it's got extra bits stuck on, it'll look a lot nicer, I think. Alright, that's the kind of right way up. Just about. And it didn't cracken itself to death, which is always nice. Oh yeah, I turned the engine off, didn't I? So let's bring this down and we'll recover at least a little bit of the funds that we used getting it back up, or getting it up there in the first place. I've not really done this with any of my rockets so far. I've done other playthroughs where I do this with literally every rocket stage to try and avoid leaving stuff up in orbit as much as possible. But this is really the first design of this particular playthrough where I've made an effort to stick the extra bits on needed to bring it back down again. Right, can we... Did I burn off the... No, we still have a bit of... Oh, that's why it's not responding, because we're still in docking mode. Might as well burn off some... There we go. Burn off our final bit of speed. We're still a little on the heavy side, because we still have all this oxidizer that we can't dump out. No, I didn't put a parachute on the mid-stage, Foo. As I explained when we were launching, once stuff goes out of physics range, if it's on any kind of suborbital trajectory, it basically sort of just disappears. Like as far as the game's concerned, it gets destroyed. So you have to have mods that bodge it slightly if you want to do fully recoverable and reusable staging with parachutes. Because you can do that. You can stick parachutes on things and they'll float back down. But then they just vanish as far as the game's concerned by in the vanilla game. And I've actually used that mod before. It's not a bad one. I can't remember what it's called though. But it's a nice idea. Right, we're getting a bit of overheating. Stuff might explode. This might not be recoverable. Like the engine is almost certainly going to explode. Because we're not really slowing down that much. Yeah, the engine's going to go boom, and that's the most expensive thing on this stage. So there goes the engine. And if the rest of it explodes as well, then... No, it's actually slowing down enough. We're actually through the thicker part of the atmosphere. Oh well, we'll get a little bit of money back, but not a lot. Sadly, you don't get the scorching effect, the visual scorching effect on other parts as you do these days on the ablative shield. You know what I mean? The heat shield. Right, there we go. So that'll just float back down to the surface, so we can actually speed this part up a little bit. So yeah, at most we're going to recover like a couple of thousand funds. It won't be a lot. If I'd left more fuel in that stage to fire the rocket retrograde, to break it more before it hit that hotter part of the re-entry stage, I might have been able to save the engine. But as it was, no. But on the other hand, I probably have saved more money by transferring that fuel to the space station and not having to haul up the 500 units of fuel. It's 500 out of 4,000. That's a pretty decent proportion. So yeah, I wasn't planning to do that. Oh, that was meant to happen. It's a good idea you hear, chat, because I wouldn't have thought to do that otherwise. Yeah, that was not supposed to happen. But never mind. Apparently that didn't have a very high impact tolerance, even though we weren't going very fast. I guess some extra parachutes would have been more appropriate. So there we are. We've kind of done the contract, but technically not really yet. But I'll technically complete it once we're off stream. But it's up there, and it has the capacity to hold 4,000 units of fuel, and that's the main thing. So there we go, my first space station of this playthrough. And hopefully the game will give me some nice contracts to add more bits to it, and it can look a bit more interesting than it does at the moment. Although it's not bad, it just looks like a bit of a stick. So yeah, let's wrap things up there. In fact, let's also find somebody to foist you upon. So thank you all for tuning in, those that have. Thank you for all the resubs. And something else. I don't know. Don't I normally say something else there? Wow, my brain is just not good today. But that's not really a surprise. New meds will tend to do that. So, oh yeah, there we go. Rocketology is still going. I'm trying to do multiple things at once, which is never good for my brain. So yeah, thank you all for tuning in. I hope you have a good day. I hope you've enjoyed yourself, and I will catch you next time.